Hi, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Lauren.
Welcome to Capital Conversations with Rachel and Lauren.
This week, we're going to be talking about my coverage of the congressional stock trade ban, Rachel's coverage of the Texas redistricting war, an interview with Congressman Greg Landsman, and then we're going to be answering any and all questions about our daily schedules on the Hill. For our first segment, we're going to be talking about what's on the right, what's on the left, and everything in between.
And this is the podcast that we want for everyone. It can be for your Midwestern friends, it can be for your Southern belles, anyone on either coast. We want all of your non-political people to know what the heck is going on in Capitol Hill, and we're going to be the ones that bring you that coverage.
Don't forget about the people that we bug every day. We're also here for you. But on a more serious note, Rachel and I are from two different parts of the country where national news doesn't necessarily always reach, and that's why we're here to break it all down.
And so you won't always see us on Zoom. This is our little setup right now because we are in the August recess work period, which basically is a 6-week stint where the lawmakers are gone. They are not in DC and they are back in their districts. And so that's when they get to do a lot of different things, meeting with their constituents, meeting with reporters like us who are traveling to their states. And so right now we are over Zoom. We will be in person in our studio, right next to each other, getting to see each other. And for right now, though, we are going to be doing this over video, and you'll get to see an interview also with the Congressman Landsman later as well. But I think what's really interesting about recess is a lot of people don't know what that is. They hear that and they think, oh, I had recess in school. Like they don't know what recess is. And that's just like another one of those terms that we're going to make sure to break down when we're doing this podcast and we're talking about things that are in this DC, Maryland, Virginia bubble that people don't really know about. That's what our podcast is here for. So, Lauren, you are traveling a lot. I was traveling a lot. And
Yes.
why don't you talk a little bit about what you have done this month so far, and then leading up to in a couple weeks when session is back
Mhm.
up, what this transition is going to look like, basically.
Yeah, I mean, August recess is typically, I mean, like you said, the lawmakers are not in town. So it's like 6 weeks of them back in their districts doing district work, which does make for a little bit less of a load on Congress reporting. But I would say this August has been pretty busy, despite them not being there. We've seen the redistricting wars in Texas and now California, that you've done a lot of coverage on, and I've done some just
Yeah.
being from Texas. And then actually this coming weekend, I know that some farther left members are holding rallies. I'm going to a rally with Senator Elizabeth Warren and Congressman Maxwell Frost. They're holding a rally in the most competitive district in the country going into the 2026 midterms. Congressman John Bacon is retiring, and he's held that seat for 5 terms now. And he's kind of just been an anomaly in that seat. It is a seat that now is ranked, I think, lean Democrat, which is pretty big for a Republican held seat going into the midterms. So that's probably the most likely flip the Democrats have. But I think they just want to be sure they're holding a rally there to kind of go over Congressman Bacon's record and show people that Omaha is going left. There was a mayoral race earlier this year that a Democrat won for the first time in a long time in Omaha. So I think that is signifying a shift that is going further blue and is a good sign for Democrats going into 2026 for that seat. But I've also been covering the congressional stock trade ban for
Oh,
quite
yeah,
some time
that's a big
now.
one.
So I find the congressional stock trade ban really interesting. It's a really long time issue just because, I mean, it's been controversial for quite a long time. I think
Mhm.
that the overwhelming majority of voters do want a congressional stock trade ban just because essentially, let me break it down what it is. So as of right now, members of Congress can trade stocks. And I think that that creates a lot of problems with what people see as insider trading because they know what laws are going to be passed, they know what's coming. And so then it kind of elevates them if they are using any of that knowledge to trade stocks. We've seen a lot of people come into Congress, start trading stocks, and come out with
Mhm.
a lot more money. I think that one example that she's not necessarily the best example to use because she doesn't trade the most stocks of anyone, but Pelosi is like the number one example that comes to anyone's mind whenever it comes to
Yeah, she's the most
members of
talked about
Congress.
for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, there are really staunch advocates who are for bans that do not trade stocks at all. There's a really big bipartisan group, or I wouldn't say huge, but a pretty decent sized bipartisan group. There's AOC in this group, and then Congressman Tim Burchett from the far right and the far left, which is really interesting that they earlier this Congress they were meeting weekly to talk about this ban. I actually interviewed Congressman Burchett a few months back on this ban, and
Mhm.
so you can watch that on our website. And it's interesting because this is a long time issue, but it is. I've talked to a lot of Republican staffers, and it is a hard thing to get on the floor because, I mean, obviously, this is where a lot of members make a lot of money. And so
Right.
this puts them at kind of a crossroads. Like people ask like, why would a stock trade ban in Congress not be common sense? And it's because if Speaker Johnson puts it on the floor, it's going to put a lot of his Republican colleagues at like a risky vote if they don't want to vote for it. Like that's putting them on record voting for something that it could be actively taking away part of their income. That is kind of where the stickiness comes from with putting that bill on the floor. And I think that that's why that bill has been in the works for so long, why there's so many versions of the bill in both the
Right.
House and the Senate, and it's never actually made it to the floor for a vote.
Well, and that's something that we have seen a lot in the last couple years. But those risky votes are something that goes into, that's another question that I've gotten, I think, from just people like, oh, how do you know what's coming up on the floor? Like how do they make that decision? And so one of those things is that it's very interesting because there are so many bills out there that do seem like common sense, like the stock trading ban. And yet,
Exactly.
and then it becomes very political. And I think that on
Mm-hmm.
both sides of the aisle, I think that that's something that we've seen increase so much is
Mm-hmm.
the polarization of the parties, where it's very rare to find common ground and it's very rare to
Totally.
collaborate on stuff. And so this is again like one of those like AOC and Chip Roy are
Mm-hmm.
advocating for the same thing. Like you don't see that very often. And
Yeah.
I think that that's not only does that show people, like who live in my hometown of Illinois, who don't really know, what's going on in Congress. I get asked that all the
Mm-hmm.
time, is it true? Do they all hate each other? Is it true? Like, do they all
I
hate
get
Trump?
that.
Is it true? Do they all love Trump? And it's like, it's kind of a mixed bag. Like, yeah, you see a lot of stuff
Mm-hmm.
on TV where people are yelling and screaming and getting their clips, but sometimes it's just that. It's just clips. It's just to put on social
Totally.
media. But there are
I would
times
say
where,
more often than not.
yes,
More
more
often
often
than
than
not
not.
that, yeah.
And you see, and we'll see, like we'll be out on the Capitol steps where usually we wait for lawmakers to
Mm-hmm.
leave the floor when they're doing votes and whatnot. And, you'll see a Republican and a Democrat literally and figuratively arm in arm, like just
Yeah.
walking down
Like
the
just
steps with
chopping it
their
up.
friends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I think, but unfortunately, like I think with the nature of politics, and you could, both parties blame the polarization of politics on numerous things.
The
I think
media.
that the media, social media, the emergence of Donald Trump, that's been something that Democrats have kind of
Mm-hmm.
nailed. On the other side, Republicans have said that Democrats have become, way too radical. So that's how
Yeah.
everything is polarized. So it is interesting that unfortunately, whether it's right or wrong, this bill
Mm-hmm.
is kind of hitting this sticky almost backboard because
Yeah.
something that seems common sense is just kind of like hitting all these roadblocks.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, you kind of look at that in all stints of politics, like any bill that comes to the floor, I think that
Yeah.
you see a lot of common sense aspects of it, and then the politics come into play and it completely changes everything. Like we're seeing that, I mean, with what you're doing with redistricting, there
Yeah.
is a lot of things that politics are playing deeply into that redistricting on both sides, the right and the left, like Texas Republicans are doing it, but also California Democrats are doing it. If you want to
Yeah.
kind of dive into that, dive into a little bit of how Texas led the effort, and now
Oh gosh.
Governor Gavin Newsom is just fighting
Yeah.
back.
So redistricting is kind of this wonky process that is a little confusing. And the best way that I can describe it is, so for instance, I'm from Illinois. I live in the first district in Illinois, and that is a very blue district. And a lot of that reason is because it encompasses a lot of areas of Chicago. And maybe most people don't know this, but a lot of major cities are more blue than red. That's just kind of the nature of the game right now. And so a lot of states every 10 years will go through the census and they will look at populations and they will think, okay, well, this district is mostly represented by like Democratic population. We should draw the district that way. And it depends who's in power, right? Like Democrats will obviously draw the maps to be more advantageous for them. Republicans will do what's best for them. So what is interesting, though, about this moment of redistricting is that it's 4 years after, 4 years after the last time that they redid maps, and so we're supposed to be waiting until 2030, technically, to be doing that. With that, Texas has decided that they would like to redraw their maps to add 5 Republican seats. So they're kind of writing Democrats out of their districts. Or they're putting some Democrats in the same district. We're seeing the Congressional Progressive Caucus chair, Greg Casar, he is now going to be in the same district as Lloyd Doggett. And so that is setting up, that's a whole nother time for a whole nother podcast of what that means. But basically, it's adding Republican presence in the House is the goal. And so Democrats have been very mad about this. They have said that it's obvious that Republicans can't win in 2026. And so that's why they have to add new seats for them because they, can't win the normal way. Well, there's some truth to that only in the fact that historically the House flips to the party opposite the White House in the midterms. You can trace that back several elections. So on the Democrats are on a historical path to flip the House. But of course, that also is imbued by a lot of factors, like the president who's in charge of his agenda, what legislation has been passed, yada yada. Now you go to like basically Texas's opposite, which is California.
Eyeballs, yes.
Yes, complete opposite. And you go to California, and California is very blue, has a majority blue delegation. And so they have decided that they want to also do redistricting and they want to add, 5 Democrat seats, basically to offset this Republican takeover, is what they're calling it. The problem that California is facing that Texas is not facing, because I think this is a lot of things that people don't understand, that Texas can technically do this. Well, they can't technically, they can do it because they have the powers under the legislature. However, in California, they have an independent redistricting commission. And that's like, it's a bipartisan, equal split. They do the maps, and they get voted on by the voters. So what California has to do before they can even start doing this official map redrawing is they have to hold a special election this November to basically ask voters if it's okay to bypass that commission and just do it through the legislature. And so that is where the two instances are different. California cannot just go through their legislator and can't just, pass the maps. Texas can do that. So that has caused kind of this rift that's kind of trickling now down into other states. At one point, Illinois, Missouri, Indiana, Florida, New York, maybe Massachusetts, like all of these states are now talking about maybe doing it. We've seen some Indiana Republicans, over the last couple of weeks speaking out saying, yeah, we want to do this. And I think that a lot of people on both sides are like, whoa, hold your horses. There's a lot of rules and regulations, and some people are just saying that they think it's just not right at the end of the day. But states' rights versus national rights, that's another thing, trying to figure that out. And so we have a Republican from California who could potentially lose his seat, and he might bring this bill forward he wants to bring this bill forward in Congress, and he wants to have it be voted on. And again, kind of circling back to what we were talking about earlier, it's, what bills get put on the floor. Speaker Johnson could put this California Republicans bill on the floor, or he could
Yes.
not. Because if they put it on the floor, you'll probably see a lot more Republicans than you think voting for it. You also might see
Yes.
some Democrats voting for it because they're like, we don't want any part of this. So,
Yeah. But then I mean you have to look at the Trump angle because
right.
Trump backed the redistricting effort in Texas. So then you take a Republican who is in kind of danger in California who wants this bill, but then you
Mhm.
put it up against a Trump backed effort in Texas. And it just gets so complicated.
It gets messy. Like it gets messy, and
Yeah.
it comes back to that topic of like polarization in politics of like some things that seem common sense. Like it seems common sense to wait until 2030 to redistrict.
Yeah.
It makes sense to do that. This is the arguments that we're hearing from a lot of different people. It makes sense to just
Totally.
wait. Strategists from both parties have told me that they think it's stupid. They think that it's just a
Yeah.
power grab from both sides, and both sides just need to rein it in. Some Republican
Yeah.
strategists have said that, Texas has the right, California does not, Democrats started this, et cetera. And
Yeah.
whether either side is right or wrong, that is not our job to decide.
Hmm.
But it does make for a very interesting session when we come back.
Totally.
When we come back,
Yeah.
it's going to be a heavy month. September is a
Yeah.
heavy month. We got a lot going on. Stock trading ban, like you talked about,
Hmm.
possibly a vote on redistricting. Don't forget the Epstein files. The Epstein files are
Yeah.
still a big thing. You know,
About to heat up in House
about to heat up.
oversight.
You've been covering the Biden auto pen hearings. There's a lot going on, and the House has
Yeah.
a lot. to look forward to. And
Yeah.
Speaker Johnson hasn't had the easiest job lately. I think he will have an
Or
even
ever.
forever, really.
Or ever.
Um, so
People
it'll
say, hey, people say that the speakership is the worst job in Washington for a reason.
I understand it. I wouldn't
Oh,
want it. I
nope,
wouldn't want it. I don't know anyone who would want it.
nope.
Um, but yeah, so that's what we have a packed schedule. If you think the
Yeah.
lawmakers do, we definitely will be running around like
Hmm.
no heads. So looking forward
Yeah,
to
for sure. Well, we've got definitely a busy September coming up.
it.
And with this being an off year for elections, a busy October too, since we don't have November elections. But coming up next, we have an interview with Congressman Greg Landsman, where he talks about a little bit of what he does during recess and what kind of the media trail looks like on a district work period. We're here today with Congressman Greg Landsman during August recess. He's from Ohio, and we're just going to talk a little bit about what members do during recess. What do they do when they go home for a full 6 weeks? Because I know that obviously some constituents are under the impression that y'all go home and don't do any work.
So I think there are members who don't work during this recess. Like I don't know this to be like true, but I think there are some people who've been there for a long time and they probably don't do a lot. But also there may be some new people that don't do a lot. So there are some members who probably don't do much.
Mm.
Then, like some members go and raise a lot of money, and some members go on codels, and some of those codels are pretty important in terms of this. These are like trips abroad. I guess they could be, around the country too, but it's a time when members can go and work on something, and it's typically a good bipartisan experience where people are starting to like build relationships that around meaningful work, even if it's, somewhere really interesting in the world, and seems like it's extravagant or something. But, um, for me, it's an insane amount of work, in part because I like being at home and I like the work I do at home. So we do a ton of tours of schools, of factories. I just did two tours. One was with GE, which they build engines here, and you learn a ton about what they need from us, and then spent some time with our credit union folks. Yesterday, I visited another manufacturing facility and worked through some of the issues they're having. Some of it's legislative, some of it's just stuff they need help with the administration. I'll go to schools. I go all over, and it's us picking up work. That's how I think of everything. Like we go somewhere and there's constituent work that we pick up, and or there's legislative work, or there's work with the administration. But oftentimes you do some of the most important work at home. And in DC, my days are like 10 to 15 hours, like, or let's say 10 to 12 hours.
Mm.
My district days are probably about the same. I also represent a pretty small district, so it's easier for me to get around.
Mhm.
I can cover the district in a day, like pretty well,
Mhm.
and then and still get home. There are some districts that are just enormous, like
Mhm.
Montana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, is Montana one or two?
I know that I think Wyoming's only one.
Well, that's what I meant. I meant Wyoming. Sorry. Wyoming is one, but even Montana, and so yeah, a lot of folks will end up having to travel all over, and they don't get to go home. So they may be home in the district, but they're not in their own house. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just
Uh,
easier for me.
Whenever you get to go home for this time, like obviously you're a member of the House, you're a member of the people, elected by the people. How does going home and being home for an extended amount of time help you get a better grasp on what your constituents want to see in Washington whenever you're there voting to represent them?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of people being home and then when they're home out in the district doing town halls. We do a ton of town halls, we do a ton of community conversations, tours, all these things, right? We go to schools, we go to factories, we go to plants. You get a very clear understanding not just of what the issues are, that matter most to people and the businesses that you represent, but how they're talking about it and what they're expecting of you. To me, that is the most important thing. And then you should go to DC for a couple of days and vote and to work on those things. I don't like the current schedule because you're in DC more than I think we should be. You go to DC most weeks, you're there for 4 to 5 days. They're not terribly productive days because there's only one or two, maybe three really important votes, which should not, it should be more than that.
Mhm.
Uh, and and they tend to be much more partisan, and not really at all related to what I hear back home. So like I'd love to see the schedule change in a new Congress where members are home more, um, but are expected to do actual work. And I think there's ways to incentivize that where you're doing field hearings all over, and you start to measure what members do in the district. Right now, members of Congress really get graded on sort of their voting record, which is great. Obviously, that's very important. I would love to see like an organization stand up, focus on how much engagement members do when they're home.
Mhm.
So like there's an incentive for members to be out. I think that would be good for Congress. It's because then you're going to go back and you're going to be much more likely to represent what people are saying. Here's my final take. Sorry.
Mhm.
I think the current schedule and the time that members spend in DC, which is a ton of time, is very good for leadership and lobbyists. I
Yeah.
don't think it's great for constituents. So one of the reasons why we do so much when I'm home is because I want to pack it in. I want to get as much time in as I possibly can because I'm much more effective when I know exactly what people are asking for.
Mhm.
I think that's really interesting because I feel like a lot of people who don't know what's going on in DC, they think that all the work gets done in Washington. And so when things don't get done in Washington, people will say kind of what Lauren said earlier, like, do members even work? Like what even happens in the Capitol every single day? And I feel like a lot of that is very important then for you guys. And also must be kind of stressful for you to then have to go home and to explain to constituents who don't even know really what's going on in Washington. Like, we are doing work, here's what we're doing. Like, is that stressful for you? Like when you're going and talking to constituents?
Um, no, not, I mean, maybe, they tend to be pretty great. They just, this is one of the reasons why I encourage people just to go, everywhere. Um, especially in places where you're least expected because people are like, oh, that's great you came. I actually don't have anything, or in most cases, I could really use help with this or that or the other thing, and it's just it's where you get work that you can go and get done, right? Because it's the assignment comes from constituents as opposed to the assignment coming from leadership.
Obviously, you do a lot of work with constituents while you're home. But one thing that you do, like both at home and in DC, is media. And you do a lot of media. I feel like I see you on every podcast that I've ever watched. What media are you focusing on in recess? How does your media look different when you're home working with local stations and with social media? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so we try to do as much of all of it as we can, no matter if no matter where I am, right? So, I think it's really important for politicians, elected officials to meet people where they are, right? So you go physically to where people are, but it's also true that each of us, spends time on listening to this podcast or watching the news, this particular broadcast, or we like this influencer. Like there are places that you can find folks online, right? And I think you have to find them there too, which means like you go on, as many podcasts as you can. I mean,
Mhm.
strategically around issues that either your constituents are engaged in or we'll do podcasts with folks here and, it'll be a small podcast where like a mom, has like small in the sense that some of these national, like small, like not
Mhm.
like Joe Rogan, but like she's got like 2,000 other moms and they listen to it. That's a big deal to like be able to have a conversation about like parenting with her.
Mhm.
You know what I
Totally.
mean? I don't know. Like, we try to do, even when I'm in DC, as much local news as I can. And when I'm home, we try to do just as much national. And I mean, it's just, we try to fill the day with as much as we possibly can in terms of being out, but also doing the media stuff because it is also part of meeting people where they are,
Mhm.
right? Like I can go do a tour or have a town hall or a community conversation. I can also meet people, by getting on a podcast and having a conversation. They're like, okay, I feel like and we read the comments. So it is to some extent a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, completely. I feel like obviously with phones, you do not have to be as engaged in your community face to face as you did prior. Like especially with not only podcasts but social media, like everything revolves around that now. That kind of leads me into my next question. It's a little bit more fun. I think that Democrats have really been leaning into hopping on trends on social media. Like we saw Congressman Subramaniam do the Aura farming TikTok that went viral, or we also
Nice.
I saw Senator Markey do a TikTok with a few influencers this week. How have Democrats been leaning into this use of trends to meet people where they are? Because I mean, that's where these young voters are is on
I
TikTok,
think you,
on
yeah,
Instagram.
I think you, look, I think you have to meet people where they are, but like be really intentional about going and appreciating that a huge part of your job is showing up and constantly learning and constantly understanding where people are and what they want,
Mhm.
so that you can go and be a good representative. And that means like going to places in real life that you may not otherwise go. Like go be part of the culture and whether it's a WWE event or it's a festival that you wouldn't normally like. It's important to show up at these places.
Mhm.
Same is true for what's happening on social media. You have to also show up in these places in your authentically, right? Like you can't. I think if you see a trend and you're like, oh, that looks fun, or that looks like something I would enjoy doing, then great, go do it. And I would encourage all of my colleagues to like do that, Republicans and Democrats. Like you should do that. Like I want more people to like have a relationship with their elected officials so that our democracy is strengthened and they're more likely to want to work on the issues that people care about as opposed to what just comes down from on a high from leadership and lobbyists, which isn't always what my district wants, right?
Mhm.
I do caution people to really stay in those places where you are yourself. I do a lot of social media,
Mhm.
a ton. Like we did like 5 or 6 videos last night, I think. But like we recorded them, because there are like these big topics we want to like communicate on.
Mhm.
Uh, and I do a lot of podcasts, a lot of stuff with influencers. I don't do the trends. I don't think like because I'm not sure I could pull them off. I think there was one trend where my daughter was like, maybe,
That's
you know what I
awesome.
mean? But
Mhm.
like, I don't know. I like the fit check
Oh
trend.
yeah.
No,
I
you
thought
do
that was
good.
fun.
You've got really good shoes. That's what.
That's it. That's all I have because I wear
No,
the
no,
same,
no.
but I changed my shoes. What else? I'm not going to do a dancing trend.
That rolls out a lot of them,
Members
I
should
think.
start doing
That
dancing
rolls out a ton, like not a good dancer. Uh, Maybe a lip sync trend. I saw a couple politicians do that once, and I was like,
kits.
wait, what did Suhas do?
So there's this rowing team, I forget where, but this kid stands on the front of the boat and he like does these moves to get the rowers to row on the right way. And Suhas did it on the house train in Rayburn, and he did it while the train was moving, like
It
standing.
was pretty good.
I saw that. I didn't know that was a trend. I
Yeah.
just thought it was funny. Okay, fine.
Yeah. And I mean,
I
I think it had like
that's
500,000 views last time looked at it.
I mean, maybe if like I don't think I could pull it off. I guess the point is it's great. Yes, I think both sides are leaning more into like, doing this. AOC had a really good point. We had a conversation, like a dinner, a social media dinner, and we had a really good conversation about like how to go do this. And she talked about something that is talked about on social media and online a lot, which is the idea of like when you're on a new platform, the only way to like figure out that platform is to go through Cringe Mountain, and like you can't avoid it. There's no way to succeed on that platform, which may be a very important platform to talk to the people that you want to talk to without going through Cringe Mountain. And it's a good thing for me to keep in mind because like I don't want to go through Cringe Mountain. You know what I mean? Like, but maybe you do. As long as I can do it authentically. I don't mind it being like, oh, that was cringy. If like that's who I am, I just don't want to do something that is performative and not me.
Yeah, totally.
That's interesting. I think also that's one of the things that we've been talking about recently is like whether or not these trends are working. I think that it's interesting to watch because like Republicans are obviously like for them this is like hilarious. They're like they love
They
making
love it.
they love it. They love making fun of it. But I think what's interesting about that is that for better or for worse, it's getting people talking. So even like how you said, like that video has like 500,000 views. It probably has more as we speak. Like I
Mhm.
think it's just interesting that even if you are kind of being in that cringy aspect, it's getting people talking. It's getting people wondering, minuscule things like, oh, I didn't know the Capitol had a train, or I didn't know that like members could actually be fun. Like I think just like little things like that that like people wouldn't know.
I
Like
want to do
it work, I guess.
I like these like short conversations. We're trying to figure out how to do this where like I get mic'd up and somebody else gets mic'd up and you get to hear like what it's like to have like what a normal conversation is between a member and like a colleague or a constituent. You know what I mean? Where like
Like on sports, like football, where they mic
exactly
them up
Like,
and
where you
they're
mic
like
them up like
talking. That's so
yes.
funny.
that to me would be a really cool trend
Can
and I
you do
think
that on
be
house floor?
helpful.
If yeah, would they
You
allow that on the
can't
house
do it
floor?
on the house floor, but like
Yeah.
we don't interact on the house floor. I mean, yes, we all interact on the house floor, but you interact in the hallways. Now, like I just did a tour of GE. That we couldn't mic I couldn't have been mic'd up for that because like it's pretty protected intellectual property,
Yeah.
Mm.
right? But the one I did yesterday, which was a manufacturing plant, like having that conversation, I think
Mhm.
some of that stuff could be very cool
Yeah.
and it would be informative. But again, I think you got to do the things that are authentically you. Like,
Mhm.
and even if you're a goof, but if it's not you, it just won't work, I don't think.
Yeah. You brought up AOC, who is obviously, she's done incredible on social media and has kind of taken the charge with Democrats this year. Like she led that tour with Senator Sanders, and she was at that social media thing you talked about. I think that Rachel has talked a little bit about whenever we're going into like the midterms, obviously we're in a trifecta right now and the minority can't really do a lot, and she's kind of led that. And so I think that Rachel has a couple of questions about that that she
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just very interesting going from a split Congress to a trifecta. I think for a lot of us, especially reporters, it's our first time for some of us covering a trifecta. It's
Mhm.
very interesting to watch like parties who were in charge. Like we had Democrats controlling the Senate, but a Republican House and a Democratic president. Now it's Republicans, all that.
But there's also like a whiplash piece to it too,
Yeah.
like because that just happened. Like Democrats in 2021 had a trifecta,
Yeah.
Right.
right? Oh, unless you're not counting the Supreme Court. Like,
No,
you're
not
counting the
counting
House?
Supreme
Yeah.
Court, counting just House, Senate, presidency. Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy that just a few years ago, it was the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And I think what you're going to see is a lot of this where over the course of the next decade,
Mhm.
because of the way the maps are set up and how sort of politics works now,
Mhm.
this may be like the norm where it flips back and forth, but it's super tight.
Right. And how is that how does it change from going from being in the majority to the minority and just or even just in general just being in the minority when you don't have virtually a lot of political power in the sense of like, you guys don't have the speakership, you're not setting that kind of legislative agenda on the floor. How do I think a lot of people are curious how Democrats are still pushing forward and still wanting things to happen, even when they can't make it like legislatively on the agenda. Like how are you guys navigating this minority, and what do you think is working and what do you think is maybe not working that you guys have learned over the last few months?
Yeah, so let me speak for myself. Like I only know the minority, right? Like I came in
Yeah.
2023. But this one does feel different. There's no question. It feels much more partisan. I mean, McCarthy did bipartisan bills. I mean, the bipartisan budget agreement was a big bipartisan deal. We had bipartisan CRs. They should have been budgets, but we had those. We had the national security bill that was bipartisan. I do think we would have had a bipartisan border security bill. We got the FAA reauthorization piece done. I mean, pretty quickly in the House. It stalled out in the Senate. They finally got it done. I mean, one of the reasons why we don't have as many air traffic controllers as we need is because that bill took way too long to get done. And so there was a bunch last term. I forced a vote on a bill that have been sitting in Congress for 25 years, the Social Security Fairness Act. And that bill helps like 3 million public retirees, teachers, firefighters, police officers, letter carriers. I was getting this everywhere I went, like, hey, this is a huge problem. This is a huge problem. So, that's why these district work periods and the town halls are so important. Everywhere I went, somebody would be like, hey, listen, I paid into Social Security and I haven't, because I also get a state pension, I don't get my money, which is just wrong. And it turns out the government was sitting on $20 billion of other people's of Social Security money that should be going to public retirees.
Mm.
And we forced a discharge petition and we got a vote. It passed and it's now law. And I believe 100% participation now. It's like, and so I think you find those opportunities to get things done, things that are deeply important to the people back home, and that includes like the Social Security Fairness Act, and pushing for that is like a huge piece of legislation. But there are smaller bills. There are letters to the administration. There are phone calls that we make to help an organization, get something that stalled out within some bureaucracy. There's a ton of casework. There's a ton of bipartisan work that if you can get through committee, if you care deeply enough about it, then you can probably get it on the floor or see if it can't get added to one of these bills that are moving. I think it does require you to be just as aggressive, if not more aggressive, because nothing's going to come your way. You're going to have to go fight for it. And obviously it's not where I want to be, but it's a good skill to develop, which is being really, really aggressive in terms of getting things done that you wouldn't otherwise get done unless you just push through.
Mm.
I think that's what a lot of maybe some people don't understand is that even though Republicans do control, the government right now, that there are still areas of bipartisanship that are happening. Obviously, it's kind of been clouded over by some of the bigger drama-filled pieces of legislation like reconciliation and whatnot. But I think that was an interesting point that there are ways to find bipartisanship. There are ways to make some democratic policies law. You just have to really work and push and find it.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is not ideal, and I remain very much committed to the fact that the biggest majority in the House is a bipartisan majority. And when Democrats and Republicans come together to solve something, you can almost always count on 300 votes. So I don't understand why the default is always to try to get to 218
Mm.
in the most partisan way. Like, don't do that. It's not good policy. And it seems like pretty terrible politics. Like, you know, I to me, that's very DC and not what most people want.
I mean, that's the biggest thing that I hear all the time is like friends or family will call me and they'll be like, does everyone out there really hate each other? Like, does everyone out there like really not?
No, we don't. Like, this is what's so
Yeah.
crazy is like we all get along, and like I honestly believe that. And then I got to go. I'm sorry, but I got to jump on another podcast. But the I believe that if you ask most people, they're frustrated on both sides. Democrats and Republicans hate this. They want to work. and they're not getting to work because it's not the committees doing bipartisan work, really meaningful work, solving problems, and then having that get sent up to leadership, and then leadership putting it on the floor, and all of a sudden we're like, on to the next thing. Right now, it's the exact opposite. It's the assignments come from on high, and it's a partisan assignment, and it's just really sort of marking something up that in this case Speaker Johnson wants or Trump wants, and then watching them try to get to 218.
Mhm.
I hear it from my Republican colleagues all the time, like, this is not what I came here to do.
Well, hopefully we'll see some bipartisan work when you guys come back in the fall. So fingers crossed.
Yes, fingers
Yeah.
crossed.
Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate
Yep,
it.
you
No,
guys are
thanks for
awesome.
being
Good
here.
luck.
Now we have our Q&A section, and this is going to be where we answer questions from you, the viewers, the listeners, our subscribers, hopefully. And we would like you guys to ask us anything and everything about us, about lawmakers, about the Capitol, about states, anything that you are wondering about what the heck is going on out here. So the first question we have is from our friend Shelby, and she asked us, how do you choose your stories? And that's a great question.
I get it all the time, actually.
Yeah, sometimes the stories choose us, and sometimes we choose the stories.
That's
Um,
very true.
so, we sometimes, like kind of what we were talking about earlier, like things that are happening right now that is big news topics, redistricting, statutory banning, Epstein files. That is stuff that it's almost like this umbrella. We know we're covering it and we're writing different stories about it as those stories progress. Other things can pop up, like a rally that's happening or a bill suddenly that's introduced. A lot of times, it's just us waking up to Slack messages at
A
8
lot of
a.m.
times.
doing that little like that little thing that gives me PTSD sometimes, and literally just talking about, just giving us our editors telling us what to do. Our editors have story ideas too that come from our higher ups. They want to see a deep dive. Lauren actually just did a deep dive story on a very interesting topic on in recess. People are getting married because it's the best
Yeah,
time to do it. And so,
yeah.
much talk quickly about kind of that story and then other stories maybe that you've selected for recess.
Yeah, I think that recess or the district work period for the members really gives us an opportunity to do a lot of fun stories whenever there's a little bit more breather room. So I got to do a really fun story a few weeks ago about kind of what staffers do during this like 4 weeks of work where we can be more remote and be more flexible. Whereas like typically the jobs on or like working on the Hill, the hours are really grueling and like
Yeah.
you have to be there a long time. Like we've spent multiple nights at the Capitol. So this is kind of just a time that allows for a lot more flexibility in a work that does not allow flexibility often. So a lot of weddings for anyone that works in the Capitol come during August. I wrote about a big breakdown. Congressman Bresnahan actually got married last Saturday. So it's not just staffers, it's members too. But a lot of people get married. A lot of people take their major vacations. I remember I was talking to a staffer last December when government funding was kind of coming up and one of his friends was getting married. And he was like, I don't know why my friend didn't get married in August.
That's so
And
funny.
so I think that it's just like, it's kind of just a time where like, this is where it is like a summer break, honestly.
Yeah.
Like we're not taking a complete break, clearly, but the workload is lighter. So it's easier to step away from the office for a vacation, for wedding planning, just stuff like that. So that was fun because like I got to kind of see the other side of what staffers and members do that isn't work,
Yeah.
which is something really fun to report on.
Well, yeah, and that's hilarious that people are like, oh, I can't believe people aren't doing things in August. Like everyone else in the world has a whole month off. Like, and I've started to think that way
Yeah,
too. Like I'll start planning my family stuff, and my family will
totally.
plan something in September, and I'll be like, well, I
I'm
can't
like,
go to
why?
that because
Yeah,
I have boats, and they're like, we don't know what you're talking about, and I'm like,
yeah,
I forgot that not everyone lives in the DC, Maryland, Virginia bubble that we do.
yeah. Our next question is, what do you do during August recess? I've gotten this a lot because, like we said, we have like a good flexibility to take a week to work kind of at home with our families. Like obviously we're still working, we're still writing, but like
Yeah.
we have flexibility on where we can be since the members aren't in DC, so we don't really have as much access to them. And so August recess is like honestly a time to like get caught up on like getting to know people in DC that you don't typically have time to get to know. I do a lot of that. Um, I feel like we do a lot of more like detail oriented reporting because we're not running around. Like
Yeah.
with redistricting, I'm sure that you've looked a lot more into like redistricting laws, and we have a lot more time to just like do well thought out reporting since we're
Yeah.
not like ping ponging across the Capitol. And then I mean, this weekend, like I said, I'm going to Omaha for a rally. So I do like, I love them being in session because I love getting like the quick access to members and like the quick stories. And obviously, it's fun to be in person, seeing everyone every day. But I do think that August recess is special because it's like we get to do a lot of good work while also being more relaxed. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching Capital Conversations with Rachel and Lauren.
And you can follow us on Instagram, on X, but don't forget to like and subscribe this video, please. And
Like
send us
it.
your questions. Please DM us, please email us. And also in the meantime, if you're looking for more things to read and watch, please visit us at washingtonexaminer.com.